and then I will just share my screen. You probably got that as well now, haven't you?
I like it.
But it won't. Oh. Well, let me click it. Why won't it work?
Don't know.
Come on.
With these answers now, the way I visioned it was a bit more of a discussion between the three of us.
Yes, yeah, we can
Up for that?
definitely, if you know, chat amongst ourselves. We are live, by the way, even if my count upper isn't working. That's not working. So we can just chat amongst ourselves live. I want to jump over onto Facebook as well, just make sure that it's clear over there that we're live.
Yeah.
So have you had nice days or horrible days?
Oh yeah, lush day.
Yeah, average.
It's been absolutely stunning weather, which is fantastic. But then I've been stuck inside for most of it.
Yeah, that is the annoying thing.
But it's nice to be, well, you could just look at a picture, I guess, isn't it? But it's nice to be aware that the weather is nice.
I think that's worse though if you're stuck inside.
Come on, try and be positive.
Oh, sorry, when I'm being realistic.
Yeah.
If you have to be stuck inside, it's better that it's raining outside.
I agree with that.
But look at the positive. I've got ginger hair. Too much time in the sun would be bad. So it's a blessing that I protected myself from harmful UV rays.
Another day gone where you're safe.
And then I can come out in the evening with the evening sun, knowing I'm safe.
Jamie Heard for this special superpowers of producing whatever vitamin it is that gingers can produce.
I don't need to go in the sun to get vitamin D. I'll just produce it, mate.
And didn't I read something the other day that red-headed people feel less pain?
True story.
Why then? It begs the question: why is such a big baby? To be fair, I don't want to fight you, so I'll push it up there.
Good question.
Okay, so a few people may have by now logged in and started watching us. Just to say, we're going to give it until 7:33, and at 7:33 we'll introduce ourselves, kind of chat through how things are going to work, etc. But up until 7:33, you can just enjoy the light-hearted catching up with each other that we've got going on at the moment.
And notice the heavily grey influence on this.
Yeah, there's a little theme going on. So when I asked Jamie and Bethan to join in, I said there is one proviso: you have to wear a grey top. And luckily, they were both able to oblige.
Just about.
Yeah, your grey is a bit light, Bethan. I'll give you that.
It's not uniform.
Next time, yeah.
Sorry.
I'll change the lighting a bit to make it look a bit more dark, a bit more darker.
I can't work out which room you're in, Bethan.
Dining room.
Dining room. Has it always been that colour?
No, painted the wall.
Oh, nice.
Day before Noah was born.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah, it's not bad.
What do you call it? A deep purple?
Cherry plum.
Oh, nice.
The plan was to make the map stand out. Can you see the map?
Yeah, I can see the map. It's definitely standing out. It's quite big, which probably helps make it stand out. But yeah, it's lovely. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, well, guess what? It's 7:33. So that means we can get going. Okay. and we do have a couple of people logged in now. So let me explain exactly what is happening. Good evening, welcome Jamie, welcome Bethan, welcome everybody tuning in. This is our first in a long time. There are many different names this sort of evening goes by. Ask Me Anything is what we're calling it this evening. In the past, I've heard it described as a Grill a Christian, or just a Q&A panel with Christians. The basic idea being that we understand, we kind of empathize with people who have questions about God, who have questions about the world, who have questions about themselves and faith and things like that. And see it as a real strength of the Christian faith that we are keen to engage with those sorts of questions. We don't see asking questions as a negative thing. We see questions as a positive thing, seeking the truth. So we've set this evening up so that folks in our community can ask questions that they have about God, about the world, about themselves and one another, about Jesus, about Christianity and faith and things like that. Those questions we've asked to be submitted on another website called sli.do, and the number for our event is 291068, and there's already 8 questions up there. So we've to be honest with you, we've got enough stuff to last us the next hour. Try and keep it to an hour for people and for you guys who are giving up your evenings as well to be here. But I wanted us to begin, before kind of addressing those questions that have been submitted, asking you guys to share just a little bit of who you are, how you came to be Christians, and like how you personally have engaged with questions and pursuing truth. So I'm going to say ladies first. Bethan.
Great, thanks. I'm Bethan Perry. I live in Amford. I go to AEC, Amford Evangelical Church, with my husband and 4 children. I became a Christian when I was 8, which is a long time ago. And I'm 34, I can't do maths. It's that amount of time ago. And I remember the night. I remember feeling that I needed to become a Christian. I was brought up in a Christian family. My dad is a pastor, like brought up with the Bible and the truths of the Bible, stories of the Bible. I was a know-it-all. But I also knew that I wasn't a Christian, that, being born into a family like that didn't make you a Christian. And I knew what I had to do, but I thought I'll leave it a bit. But at the age of 8, I realized I needed to make a commitment to Jesus Christ, that my life and my afterlife, as it were, depended on it. I was scared of the things that I had done wrong, even as a goody two-shoes 8-year-old, and I knew that I deserved to be separated from God, because God is perfect and can't stand wrong, but that he had made a way for me to be close to him and to be friends with him and to be a child of his, because he had punished my sin on somebody else, on Jesus Christ. And it was my parents that sat me down on their bed after a meeting that we'd been to. I wanted one of the books that someone was giving out at the end of the meeting. Being the pastor's daughter, Dad said, no, let other people take it. And there wasn't any left for me, so I wanted to know what it said. Dad and Mum just sat me at their bed and explained to me for the 100th time, but my eyes were open that night, and I realised that I didn't need to be scared anymore. I didn't need to be worried. Jesus had taken the punishment that I deserve, and Jesus wanted to love me and give his life for me, and that fear was taken away, and I could be a child of God. So obviously I was 8. I didn't ask any philosophical questions, and I still haven't really. I'm quite a simple kind of person, don't think too much. But having said that, growing up then as a teenager, then going to university, as an adult, things have come across my path that have made me question things and have made me kind of bed down in what I believe. One of the exciting things I remember when I was in 6th form was just realizing the weight of evidence behind the Bible. So I'd never asked, like, is it true? But I did ask, how do we know? Like literally, how do we know about these things, how that happened, and are we certain about this? So that was one question maybe I grappled with a bit, and found exciting answers regarding the historicity of the Bible and how solid it is. Yeah, does that answer your
Yeah, that's
question?
cool. It just dawned on me that I've got no idea what you did in university.
Welsh language and literature, and then I did a PGC, so I was a teacher for a bit.
I didn't know that actually, but that had also escaped my mind. Okay, well, great. Thank you, Beth Ann, for being on and sharing that. And if anybody asks any questions in Welsh, you can have a first stab at answering them. So if you want Beth Ann specifically to answer, please do ask the question in Welsh. James, Philip, Heard. I won't give away your date of birth as well. That's too much personal information.
Exactly.
But yeah, introduce yourself. Who are you? A little quick overview of Coming to Faith and any questions that you've like engaged with or wrestled with or what have you.
Yeah, so I'm Jamie. I live in Ammanford, go to AEC as well. 2 kids, wife, a fairly middle of the road kind of existence, you might say, work for university. But yeah, I came to faith when I was about 19 years old, 18, 19 years old. Hard to put an exact timeline on it. I wasn't raised in a secular home, but I wasn't necessarily raised in a kind of Bible believing Christian home either. So to be honest, what am I, 33 now? So back in the 90s, that probably wasn't that uncommon. I'd say that was fairly normal, kind of 80s, 90s. People still kind of nominally called themselves Christians. I went to a church school, which basically meant I went to church up to a certain age in order to get into the school. And that was about it, really. Kind of flirted with the idea of Christianity. But then when I was kind of 18, 19, struggling or wrestling so much with the idea of identity. So this has been a huge theme through most of my life, actually. And it's something that kind of really made me want to know Jesus. It was kind of, up until you're 18, you don't really go through a whole lot in your life. Even the worst things in your life aren't actually that bad when you're that age, or not for me anyway. But then I actually started to experience the world, started to experience some real struggles, things happening in my life, in my personal life, in my family life, that made me just question everything that I ever believed. And that kind of slowly brought me on a journey of faith, and discovering who Jesus was, finding out more about myself, finding out more about him, finding out more about the God of the universe, how I might fit into that. And what's interesting is it's an ongoing struggle, the idea of identity. Who am I? What's my place in the world? And just because I am a Christian and I do have faith, doesn't mean that I've got all the answers. And there'll be a lot of people tonight to ask questions, and I might be sitting in the chair going, that's a great question, Sammy, what's the answer? Because it's a continuing kind of, you just never know the answers. And it's one thing knowing the answer, but it's another thing living it, trusting in it, wrestling with it in the kind of day-to-day life as things go wrong, and things you plan for don't necessarily happen in the way you hope it to happen. So, I've been Christian now 14 years, thereabout, and I just feel like I'm learning every day, learning more about who God is, who I am. But what I do know is he's great, he's loving, and he's consistently there for me when I'm inconsistent, which is fantastic.
That's great. Thanks, pal. I'll just round that off and say, well, I'm Sammy. I'm 37. I don't know why we're showing off how young or old we are.
I'm the youngest of the group then.
I don't even know if that's the right age anymore. I am at that age where I've started to forget, but I think that's about right. And I am pastor in Amford Church. I'm the minister here, or one of the ministers anyway. And I guess my upbringing was, again, like Jamie said, sort of pretty normal. Attended the local church, didn't have any sort of enthusiasm for it, but no great distaste or disdain for it either. Was brought up, and much like Bethan was saying, never really had a sort of problem with the sort of things that I was told. Quite happy learning the stories in Sunday school of the things that went on long ago. Very familiar with the story of Easter, which I now see as like the central story of the Christian faith. But right throughout my entire life, I think I can only just remember knowing that Easter was a thing and accepting that, really trusting that. What was key for me was discovering why Easter being a thing, Jesus coming, Jesus dying, Jesus rising to get life again, why that was an important thing. You know, there's loads of kind of history that we learn in school, or at least I did history up to GCSE. So, you know, modern history, medieval history, ancient history, all those sorts of things, some of which translates to, and that's important for you to know now. It wasn't until I was about 17 or 18, started coming to the youth group in Amford. Kevin Adams was the pastor back then. I think he also ran the youth group when I first started coming along, and started to hear an explanation of why the things that I'd always taken for granted, Jesus having done, made a difference, was important to me, why it was news that we kept on celebrating and sharing 2,000 years down the line. So again, like Bethan, I've never been one of those people who asks deep thoughts, questions about existence and what have you. I remember disappointing my mother once. It must have been when I was about 14, 15. And maybe I've got an elder brother, and he was a lot more angsty in his teenage years than I was. I was properly chilled out as a teenager. And frustrating my mother that I really didn't care about the questions that she'd asked when she was a teenager, like, am I real? Is this world like a real place? The sorts of things that I guess I watched The Matrix and just decided that those questions were actually plot lines to films rather than honest questions we could ask. But I've never really had that deep existential sort of experience. I've got an inquisitive mind. I do like asking questions. I do like searching for answers. I like YouTubing how to do things and kind of learning and feeding that way. So I have engaged with and interacted with all manner of questions that people around me seem to be having very often. And that's not to say that I haven't then kind of gone along with those questions, but I don't think I've ever really been the sort of person who said, aha, well, if there's suffering in the world, how can we believe in God? I've always been more of a kind of person going, okay, some people see suffering as a problem. How has anybody maintained their faith then if that's like a genuine obstacle or what have you? So that's kind of where I lay on the question spectrum, as it were. That is definitely enough of an intro, and time we dive in to some of the questions that have been asked over on the Slido. If you want to ask a question, I've put the link in the YouTube chat. Or if you've joined us via Facebook, I think the link is also in the Facebook event page as well, how to get over on there and ask a question. So I'm just going to be lazy and ask the question that is top of the pile. I don't know how Slido has arranged these, whether it's time order or alphabetically or whatever, but the first question on there, and I'm going to let one of you two respond first of all, but this is the question: what makes Christianity and Christians so special? Lots of people claim to know the truth about the world and the meaning of life. Why are you any different? And by you, I presume they mean Christians rather than you as individuals. But yeah, what makes Christianity so special? I guess the question is like in terms of a claim to truth. So it's not the only way that people describe life, the meaning of life, the world and everything. What makes Christianity different, do you think?
Hey, that's a good question and putting us on the spot, doesn't it? Because I'm glad it's not asking why are we so special, as in, do we think we're better, because obviously, if you spend any time with me, you would not be thinking that. But why would Christian? Yeah, what's the claim? Thing is, there's so much out there, isn't it? Like, so many people have different answers to different questions. So why would Christianity be trustworthy? Why is it any different, etc., etc.? And to be honest, it comes down to objective truth, which is always going to be different for everyone, isn't it? Because if you don't believe it, it's not truth to you. So objective truth, subjective truth. So is it true to you? All I can say is it's true in my life. I've read the Bible and it has answers to the questions that I have asked. Bethan alluded to the historicity of the Bible. So you can look at the fact that there's historical truths within the Bible. There's events that did take place. You can look at the kind of translations, how many different translations. So there's lots of kind of academic reasons why you can trust the Bible. But I think on an emotional level, it just has answers to the meaning of why we're here. I'm one of these people who couldn't care less about the science stuff. I did really bad in science GCSE. I barely turned up to my science classes, and we had a bit of a laugh in youth one evening where I tried to explain science-y stuff, and I just haven't got a clue. It's just not on my radar. But in terms of, I alluded to questions of identity. So who am I? Well, the Bible has questions to that. When I was growing up, the big question people used to ask in films and TVs is, what's the meaning of life? And if you've read, books, some books might tell you what the meaning of life is, but the Bible actually does have the meaning of life. It's not this big mystery. The Bible has those kind of answers. And then, whether it's true or not, because I've not read extensively on any other religion, if I'm completely honest. I'm not a scholar in Islam or Hinduism or Judaism. But, one of the big claims that the Bible makes is that God came down to us. God came down as a person, related with its creation, met with people, and came to give them hope and meaning and purpose. That's the story of the Bible. So it has answers to my questions. So that's why I trust it.
Yeah, I agree with Jamie. Like, it's consistent with how I experience the world. So what I read through the story of the Bible is consistent with how I've experienced the world. So the world is not perfect, correct? The Bible says the world is not perfect. There's suffering in the world. Yeah, the Bible says that. This is not how it's meant to be. Yeah, the Bible says that. Christians are not special. Yeah, the Bible says that. Christians are a bunch of losers and sinners who have realized we need help in this world. And that help has come from Jesus Christ. Is Christianity special? It's one of the only religions that has a living leader, Jesus Christ. That might make it different. Does that make it special? I don't know. It makes it different, I think. And I think if you flatten every belief system and religion to say, oh, it's okay, you just believe whatever you want to believe, and all routes will get you to God or whatever, I think that does quite a disservice to every religion in the world. I think everyone would be annoyed at that you're flattening their belief system to say, well, it's not really important, is it? Because everyone's the same. Christianity claims, and Jesus claims, that he is the only way to God. Jesus claimed that he has come to give life, and life to its fullness. Jesus claimed that he's come to give us peace. He offers to take our burdens, and so there's special things about Christianity, I think, that have attracted me to it, and attracted millions of people across history to Christianity, and that special thing is Jesus. So I think if you're asking that question, like, what makes it so special? Why do you think you're so special? Have a bit more of a dig go and research it a bit more and see what you think of Jesus. Is he as special as he claims he is? Or is he a liar? Or is he just mad? And therefore are all Christians liars and just mad? But if you're asking that question, what's so special about Christianity? Look into it a bit more and see if you can find answers to that question.
Yeah, and I would second, third, the overarching answer that you gave, both of you, that the reason Christianity is so compelling, and to me, is twofold. Number one, it makes sense of the world that we live in. So all the questions typically that people have, like, why is there suffering in the world? Well, I think Christianity really answers way than any other kind of system of belief or non-belief that I've ever found. The issue of science versus religion, the whole order of nature, like what science has blown the doors off for us in terms of the complexity and what have you of the world. I think Christianity makes sense of why the world is like that in a way that certainly science doesn't even pretend to want to answer, but scientific people who do want to have a worldview try and answer in loads of different ways that I just do not find compelling at all. Another question people throughout history have always had, well, why are there so many different religions? I think Christianity's got a compelling answer to that. So whatever sort of direction we turn in and encounter our world, why are we the way we are? Why are our relationships with people the way that they are? Why do we strive and seek after certain things? I think Christianity as a whole, the story of God and humanity and Jesus putting things back together, that's what makes the most sense to me. That's the first thing. And then the second thing, just Jesus is utterly different. He is utterly different, and different in terms of his rootedness and plantedness in history. It's not sensibly kind of opposed that there was a man called Jesus who wandered around the Middle East like 2,000 odd years ago, saying the things that we in our culture kind of assume he said. Like, historically, people are very happy with that he was tortured and killed. And from my perspective, and this is something I have looked into, I don't really think it's beyond doubt that he rose to life again. And if that is true, well, then that, I'll use the same phrase again, blows the doors off again. If someone dies and then rises to life again 3 days later and is seen by hundreds and thousands of people in a 40-day period, and we can credibly go along with that, then all of a sudden, lots of other things which you may be on the fence about sort of fall into place. So that's the real linchpin for me, is the resurrection of Jesus, the thing that ultimately makes it truly different. Anything just to finish off? Don't feel you have to.
No, well, I was just thinking what you're saying about Jesus, and even the way he comes down is just not what you would expect from someone claiming to be God. You see the phrase banded around that his kingdom is an upside down kingdom, which is you'd expect a king or God coming down from heaven to associate himself with people who are worthy of that. And often in the accounts, he's hanging out with the poorest people in society, those on the fringes, those on the margins, those who are deemed unclean, the least likely, if we're honest, that people would expect to be in churches. Yet he is meeting and hanging out with those people, and everything Jesus says about his kingdom is different to what we would write down as expecting a king to expect from his kingdom. Is completely different. So it's almost to the point where there's lots of creative people who have lived in history, but the Bible story is just so unexpected that it's hard to fathom that someone has just made it up.
So that's kind of like the opposite point that I was trying to articulate in terms of it just makes sense of everything. There's another way of engaging it, and I agree with you 100% that none of it is what you'd expect.
That's a nice tension that plays out there. Whilst
Yeah.
one sense does answer your questions, there's another sense which is, this is not how I expect God to act.
And that's sometimes where people have difficulty with Christianity, is because it doesn't fit our boxes, because it's so different. It's so, we're just not expecting what we read from Jesus, especially, and there's no box for that. And then people maybe think, well, that can't be true then.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's good. I appreciate that, guys. Okay, change pace. I want to say a silly question. Perhaps this is really important to the person who's asked it. European Super League, yes or no? Betha, and you're a fan of Match of the Day. Tell us what you think of the European Super League that's been announced today. It's got nothing to do with Christianity.
Definitely no.
Definitely no.
Yes, Everton will never reach the Champions League if there's a Super League happening.
Well, they're far more likely to reach the Champions League if there's a Super League happening.
No, they won't get the big money, will they?
So what you mean is definitely yes.
No, definitely no.
Oh, because the money will be less in it. And the reason it's bad is because the big six teams are being greedy. See what I mean, James? It's all inconsistent. I don't understand it. What do you think? Super League, yes or no?
Well, it's just a distraction to the mighty black and white Hammerford Town. So who cares?
Pandering. Yeah. I'm wondering how many football clubs you can support.
Too many.
I think it's an irrelevant question. I don't think it's ever going to happen. And I think they've just scored a massive PR own goal because they look like prats doing it. I cannot imagine it's going to happen. Anyway, that's enough of that. Question that was right by it. What's the best way of pleasing God?
Not trying at all, I think, is the best way of trying to please God. Again,
expand on that,
because
I spent the vast
something.
majority of my youth, right through to the end of my degree, not trying at all, and it really wound up a lot of people around me, especially my parents. Again, I'm very sorry. So having an attitude of not trying has never really struck me as being a positive thing before. So explain.
I guess it depends what your relationship with God is at that point. So what I mean is, this is something, again, that's totally different about Christianity, totally shocking about Christianity maybe, is that the Bible teaches that we have nothing to contribute to be able to show off anything to make God accept us or want us. The crazy claims of Christianity is that God has chosen to love us regardless, whether we are perfect, which nobody is, or whether we are right at the bottom of the pile, down in the muck. God has said, I've decided to love you. There's nothing in you that is lovely or lovable, but just because God is love, he has decided to love. And that's all we have to do, is accept that love, is say, yeah, do you know what? I've got nothing to offer you. I have my best works are just like filthy rags. But what I'll do is I'll accept Jesus and his wonderful life and take that for mine. And that's what pleases God, is that we come to him just as we are. And he loves to dress us in new clothes, as it were. He loves to take our filthy rags and say, yeah, they're not good enough, but let me give you new clothes. Let me give you a nice grey jumper like we're all wearing. I'm joking, you don't get a grey jumper if you come to church. But what you get is a gift. God says, there's nothing you can do that will please me. There's nothing you can do that will make me love you more. There's nothing you can do that will make me love you less. You just come to me as you are, and I'll accept you as a child if you trust what Jesus has done for you on the cross covers you. And you say yes. And that pleases God, and he is then your Heavenly Father. As a child of God, then, you want to please him. So maybe that's why people were annoyed with you, Sammy, that you're not doing it to gain his acceptance, but you're doing it to show how grateful and how much you love him. So, with my children, maybe I will always love them. They don't have to do anything to earn that love. And the same with God, but so much better and so much purer and more perfect. There's nothing that we do to earn God's love. It's just because he chooses to love us, which means that we can't lose it, because God can't change his mind. He's decided to love us, and because he's pure and perfect and unchanging, he won't say, actually tomorrow I'm not going to love you as much. Someone else take over.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Jim?
Yeah, like we haven't got enough time, have we, to explore it fully? I don't think we'd ever have enough time. It's crazy, isn't it? We always want to know what we can do, and I wonder if, as a church, when I say church, I mean like with a big C church, as in universal church across the globe, if we do a very good job of portraying that. We do look like a group of people who care very much about rules, very much care about what you act like, behave like. Do you behave in a certain way? Do you fit within the norms of which we claim are normal? It's almost as if as a church we really advertise prerequisites before coming before God, but actually, yeah, the Bible teaches us that God is not looking for us to change ourselves. Jesus came for a reason. He wouldn't be coming if we had it within us to kind of pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. But the message of the Bible is not to trust yourself, but to trust Jesus, trust in his perfect life, his perfect existence. And it's great. It's really good news. It's really good news for all of us. But it provides peace, because it comes back to one of the themes we were talking about earlier about consistency. The message in the Bible is consistent. There's a question coming up, I think, isn't there, about the consistency of the Bible, which we'll come on to later. But the Bible message, when read throughout, it's consistent. God is a consistent God, but we are inconsistent creation. As people, we are inconsistent. The way we behave with our kids, 1 minute I can be super loving to my kids, and then the next minute, because I'm in a bad mood, I can't trust how I'm going to react. I could be angry, I could be unfair, I can snap, and it's just a really inconsistent way of behaving. We do that in all of our relationships. So it's really hard to trust people who are inconsistent, but God is consistent, and that's the message of the Bible, that we can trust him. And like Bethan says, we don't come to try and make God happy and to please him. We just need to accept the life that he provides to us. And it's refreshing, it's redeeming, it's great. I love it.
I think that is a really important first block. That's me suggesting there may be more blocks that need to go on, but like the direction of it, we are loved by God, not because we are lovely. We are lovely because we're loved by God. So we don't earn his favor. We don't earn his forgiveness. We don't earn his acceptance. That is given to us by Jesus. That central event that needed unpacking by Kev for me, that Jesus came to do all the things that I could never do, so that through him I could have all the benefits of the stuff that I was never going to do. The intimacy with God, the forgiveness, the kind of the restoration to the humanity I was made for. I'm talking big idea-y sort of things that might not land in this kind of format, but yeah, it's really important to note that. But having said that, how we then live and conduct ourselves can please God or grieve God in different directions. The Bible speaks about God being sorrowful over our sinfulness, the way that we treat each other, the way that we reject him. And likewise, it says that it delights God when we listen to him, when we obey him. For some reason, the phrase that's popped into my head is it's in the gospel story of Jesus, when at the mountain, Jesus, a couple of his followers, and they hear this voice from heaven declaring, "This is my son whom I love, listen to him." And I think there's something about acknowledging who Jesus is, seeing and recognizing, declaring who he is, and listening and obeying and wanting to follow him. I think if you've understood who Jesus is, it's pretty hard not to want to follow him and not to want to listen to his voice. And I think when we do that, then I think that pleases God. And Jesus has got a lot to say about a lot of different things that we can do. I mean, the whole Bible has. I don't want to just slim it down to the words that are in red in the scriptures. But what it means when we live as humans, like we're supposed to live as humans. God has made us to be his image bearers in this world. I think that pleases God.
Yeah, definitely. And there's this phrase, isn't it, that we, by enjoying God, that pleases him. So living in his world, acknowledging who he is. It's not even acknowledge, because you can acknowledge anyone, isn't it? It's more than acknowledging. It's living in God's creation, and seeing him for who he is, the good creator, the good king of the universe, and wanting to live in that creation with him, to enjoy the fact that he loves us, to enjoy all the good things he gives to us. And it comes back again, as a church, we sometimes, if you would think, what is the message as a church, you could think, we just say everyone's sinners, we're all sinners, God's angry all the time. And it's a half truth, isn't it? We are sinners, and God hates sin. But is God, does God hate people? No, he loves them. Mm-hmm. He sent Jesus because he loves people. And he wants relationship with us. And, that nothing pleases him more than his creation coming back to him, to be in relationship with him, to know him, to enjoy him, to realize that the world is a much better place with him in it. And we see, what the world looks like without him.
Yeah, he wants our hearts and our affections, not necessarily our deeds and our works, as in they come, but from our hearts and our affections.
Yeah. Which is what we were exploring on Sunday, actually, in church, of how Jesus calls us to something that's really hard, really strong, like a doing thing, love your enemies. But that is only ever, like, even on the agenda once we've kind of been brought into this world which Jesus is making, which begins with him loving his enemies, with him sacrificing himself for those who hate him, like willingly doing that. So he wants us, like, it's the order, isn't it? The primary thing is how we relate to him, to God, through Jesus. And out of that, like, loads of stuff starts cascading and growing. When we put our roots down into Jesus, then good fruit starts being born on the tree. Well, that's the way God wants it to be anyway. Okay. I'm going to go back up to the top. I kind of got knocked down by looking at and thinking about European Super Leagues. Shmai Cambria. Ti'n mynd i gwely? No? You just come in to help me and watch. Okay, that's fine. Going back up to the top. The next question is this, and I'm going to ask the question after that as well, because I think a part of the answer to the first question is going to be the second one. So the first question is, what is your stance on Lgtbq plus? Is it still the whole love the sinner, hate the sin, or is it now okay to love who you love rather than just the opposite sex? And then the next question, which I think is going to play a part in our answer, is how do you know what is true? Don't you just decide which bits of the Bible you want to believe and not? So first question, what's the stance on LGBTQ? Is it still the whole love the sinner, hate the sin? Or is it now okay to love who you love rather than just the opposite sex? And how do you know what is true? Don't you just decide which bits you want to believe? Anybody want to kick us off?
It's a hard question, isn't it? And if I'm honest, it's something I don't fully know the answer to. So if we're dealing with the first one, so the whole LGBTQ question, And you're right, it is linked because the Bible does have something to say on this subject, but it's really hard to remove the emotion from this question. I've got friends who are gay, and it is an emotive subject, and it's difficult to really come to any sort of agreement on this point without upsetting people and causing hurt, which is kind of the last thing you want to do, particularly with your friends. One of the big issues is that it's really not the biggest issue. And we've already kind of discussed that, isn't it? The biggest issue is the fact that we all just hate God naturally, and are completely rebellious, and we just want to live for ourselves. And that is what we want to do. We want to make ourselves the ruler of our own lives. We want to determine the outcome of our decisions. We want to be able to control every situation. And that's not the reality. The reality is that we've made enemies of God, but God wants to know us, wants to love us. So that's the primary issue, isn't it? So sometimes this issue of does God hate gay people? Do Christians hate gay people? It's almost a red herring to an extent. It's not an issue of what Christians might refer to as salvation, because we've already talked about what do we bring to it? Nothing. We bring ourselves and see Jesus for who he is. But, then it does raise questions about what does the Bible say? What does the Bible say is true? And as Christians, we can't pick and choose what we fancy. So there's this tension in our lives, this tension of what the Bible says, and then trying to live that out in 2021, isn't it? Where we live in a postmodern society.
Do you know, I'm interrupt you there, Jane, because I was contemplating this question before we came on. It was submitted a couple of hours before. And there's kind of the attitude, isn't there? Not the attitude, that sounds like judgmental. I mean, the assumption that the Bible has got an outdated view of sex and relationships and sexuality and gender and all of these sorts of things, that it encapsulates the views of its time, but we have progressed, we have evolved in how we understand and appreciate things. So there's like old, which is bad, and new, which is good. And this is why I think it kind of overlaps with the second question of how do you know what's true? I mean, when you actually analyze what's going on in the Bible, when it speaks about sex and sexuality, it's not encapsulating the views of the time. It's as countercultural then as we naturally find it now. And I'm saying we find it naturally now because I've grown up in an environment and a culture and a society where expressing your sexuality, if it falls under the LGBTQ, not the heterosexual sexuality, that's boring. Any other one is, something to be celebrated. It's something that's totally and utterly normal. Like my experience of that, I'm assuming is really different to some people maybe who grew up 50 years before I did. Like for you, like it's not really something I've ever butted up against with until I've come to the Bible. And the whole point I'm trying to make is in the scriptures, when there's teaching on, when there's reference to how we use sex, what sex is for in the first place, marriage, anything about identity, because this isn't just about sex, is it? It's about identity, which you apparently the expert on, Jamie. This is the thing you've grappled with the most. The Bible comes in and it is counter-cultural. It's not just taking a snapshot of what people believed 2,000 years ago when Jesus was around, or 6,000 years ago, or what have you. In those moments, it's profoundly countercultural, even more so probably than we find it today, because much of our modern culture, even though we've tossed aside loads of things from kind of like Christendom and UK being a Christian country, like Europe and what have you, deeply ingrained and changed and shaped by the fact that Christianity exploded after Jesus rose from the dead. So it's not like old and we've discovered something new. It's always been flying in the face of what humans want to be true. I think that kind of went a little bit with the answer you were given earlier about, what we read in the Bible, it surprises us, it shocks us. It's not how we'd do it. When it speaks about how we're to use our money, how we're to use our time, how we're to use our energy and our emotions, where we're supposed to put our identity, it's always going against the grain, because we are a people who have turned from how God has made the world. So, I mean, in essence, I would say that our stance on LGBTQ, well, my stance, I should say, is in line with what the Bible, I'd say, plainly is and design human sexuality, which is, in heterosexual marriage, and outside of that, even inside of that, there's plenty of sin and instability and what have you. But don't we just decide which parts of the Bible we believe? Don't we pick and choose? I think when we start doing that, then like the game's over. I don't understand how I can prefer the narrative and the answers that the world gives, but I can't really see how I can decide that that's more true than what God has revealed in his word. I mean, it might make life uncomfortable for me at times, and it does. There's plenty of things that you kind of in like moments you say, oh, I wish God had said that we should live like this. That would be a lot easier because I prefer that way. But I kind of need to recognize that I am one who turns things the wrong way around, and I need God to turn things back up on the head. I don't know. I said I contemplated it. I felt like I just rambled then. I apologize, Beth Ann.
I agree with what you're saying. And the words, is it still the whole love the sinner, hate the sin, or is it now okay to love who you love? As you say, it hasn't changed. The Bible hasn't changed its stance. So if I am a Bible believing Christian, that is my stance, and it's still as awkward now as it was when those bits of the Bible were written. I think one thing to say is Christianity is all about relationships. So fundamentally, our relationship with God, the Creator, our Father, and our relationships with one another. And because it's about relationships, it's unashamedly about laws and rules that keep those relationships secure and safe and flourishing. So one of the relationships is husband and wife, and that is the relationship that best illustrates God's love for his people. So the Bible describes Jesus and the church as compared to a husband and wife. And a marriage between a husband and wife can be very imperfect, and a very imperfect illustration of what the relationship between Jesus and the church is. But it's what the Bible has given us. It's what God has given us to show the relationship between Jesus and the church. And one of the things about a husband and wife is that they're different, and they need to be different in order for that relationship to be gloriously working. So rather than having two people who are the same in a marriage, in order to reflect what marriage was intentionally for, which is to reflect our relationship with God and with Jesus and the church, they need to be different. So a man and a woman. But having said that, if you think, oh, because I'm gay, or because I'm lesbian, or because my identity is in this sexuality or this inclination, then I can't go to church, or I can't be a Christian, or God won't accept me. That is not the case, because if Jesus did die and rise again, he has died for you and he rose again for you. And as Christians, we believe that we die to Christ as well, as in we put everything on the table. He put everything on the table for us. He put his life on the table for us, and rose again. Then there is not one bit of my life that I can say, actually, I don't like what you're saying about that bit, so I'm going to reject it all. As in, if Jesus has given everything for us, then as Christians, I believe we should put everything on the table for him. And he has something to say about every area of your life. And for Christians, just challenging Christians right now, if there is something that you're not finding difficult about your Christian life, and I'm challenging myself as well, then are we surrendering everything? So there are Christians who are gay, and they have chosen not to live out their sexual preferences. Are there Christians that are heterosexual but have chosen not to live out some things in their lives because we have seen the power of Jesus' love for us, and we're saying, yeah, I'm going to deny myself that as well? So I guess that's just a challenge for all of us. There are things, when we come to Jesus, there are things that we lay everything before him, and he's got something to say about everything. He is Lord of everything, but he is a gentle and lowly Lord. He is a kind Saviour who will bring satisfaction and bring comfort and bring help when we deny ourselves of different things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense to me. I think that's a great answer. Thank you, Beth.
Yeah. I was just thinking as well with, we can so often be like the people described in the Bible as the kind of religious fundamentalists who care more about moral behavior than anything else. And by caring so much about that, we miss the main thing. And, as a church, as Christians, it's not our job to police what we deem to be morally acceptable in society. It's our job to follow Jesus, to love Jesus, to live the way that Jesus shows us how to live. And if we look at the people who Jesus, referred to earlier, the people Jesus did hang out with would be the people who made the religious fundamentalists at that time uncomfortable. And that wasn't Jesus, saying this way of living is acceptable, this way is unacceptable. He was just going after broken people who needed him. And, sometimes as Christians, we can be so blinkered to that, that we become obsessed with morality, which I'm not saying is not important, but are we saying morality is the most important thing? Well, we've already said the way we please Jesus most is by coming to him and to enjoy him. So, let's not become obsessed with issues when actually we should just be obsessed with Jesus. That does have implications. We probably don't have time to kind of unpack all of that this evening, but I think it's an important issue just to state that.
Yeah, I think modern, historically anyway, the church has been very reactive to things that have happened in the culture around us, and have responded by making a big deal and kind of making like a primary thing out of stuff that's happening in the culture around us, to the extent where very often, because things are important to the culture, we've kind of said, okay, yeah, we agree that's the most important thing, and we've missed sight of the fact that Jesus is the most important thing. Always Jesus is the most important thing. That's not to say that these other things aren't important. I mean, if they're important to people, then they are important issues to be dealt with and to be considered. There's just a couple of little things I want to say. I mean, the first one is, I'm pretty sure the whole love the sinner, hate the sin thing is Gandhi's quote, who wasn't a Christian. So I don't think that's ever really been the official line or the official way of doing it. And I also want to say, I don't want to make out that like Christians have consistently believed the right thing, the same thing throughout church history. There have been times and ways in which people have misused the Bible and abused the Bible for their own agenda. People are doing that still today. And that's obviously a bad thing, especially when you're a person who puts such a value on the Bible as being like God's word and his his revelation to us and direction to us, and offering us hope and everything, to fiddle with that and to twist with that at all is a serious and a dangerous thing to do. Of course, there are people out there who read the Bible now and they do the things that they need to do to satisfy themselves that this Bible is talking about something else different again. I don't agree. I've looked into these things. It's an obvious question to pursue and to ask. I don't agree with the things that people do to try and make it, to try and reconcile the Bible and current cultural views on sexuality and things like that. But there are people who do that, and if you want to go and listen to them rather than me, then it's a free country. All I'm trying to do is be consistent, and if and when I am wrong about things, I hope that I'm gracious enough to seek to learn and not just to double down in wrong things. So I don't think the Bible changes. And I think if we take kind of like the whole sweep of church history, we have believed the right things. Where individuals have used the Bible to teach wrong things, or we've been swept up in other things and just put way too much influence and stock in various issues. And we've got to be kind of wary of that as well. But for me, you read the Bible and I want to say it's pretty obvious. It's like there's like a plain reading of things. And that's where I'd naturally tend towards. Okay, time is going. So I want us to get one more question in. How do I choose? Do I choose the one that I think is the weirdest, or the one that I think is like, we're probably most comfortable answering? What do you want, weird or comfortable?
Well, what's going to be most helpful? There's no point asking a weird question if it's not going to help anyone, is it?
Well, that's almost an impossible for me to answer, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I guess.
Okay.
You asked the Super League question.
This is the one that this is true. This is the one that I think probably has got the broadest appeal to it. So the one that will be most helpful. I think Christians say that God knows everything and is in control of everything. If that's true, how can Christians wake up each day in a world with pandemic? So me just trying to put that into a question that I'd like to answer is, Christians do say that God knows everything. He's in control of everything. He's the word we've got for it is sovereign and powerful and loads of different things. So how are we not like out of our minds when we wake up every morning and there's pandemic around us?
So I've been asking the opposite question this year, as in, how can you wake up and get out of bed if you don't believe God is in control and that he's got this covered? Because if there is no rhyme or reason, if there's no purpose, if there's nobody in control of what's going on in the world right now, then I am scared and I don't know how to face the day if I am not convinced that there's a reason and a purpose for how hard it is right now. So in my experience, if I go through something difficult, the first thing I do is like pray and ask God for help, and ask God to show me partially why is this going on, or how am I meant to deal with this? If you take God out of the picture, I would be just in the dark, not knowing what to do, experiencing a hard time, experiencing suffering, experiencing pain, without any light, without any rock underneath me, without anything that makes sense. So to me, the fact that God is in control helps me through that situation, because I know he knows what's going on right now. He knows the end from the beginning. He knows how I'm going to grow through this. He knows what will benefit me in this. He will protect me from anything that's really too hard to handle, or give me grace to deal with whatever will throw at me that day. So yeah, I've been asking the opposite question all this year. How can you live? How can you have peace? How can you get out of bed if you are not putting your feet out of bed, knowing that you're putting it on the rock that is Jesus Christ, and that you're kind of literally giving your hand and say, just lead me through this day because I can't do it on my own. That's me.
Yeah, I think that is a good question. It's kind of turning the tables on folks, isn't it? Jamie, without trying to be as subversive as Beth Ann was there, how would you answer that question?
Well, look, the pandemic isn't the first time something bad has happened in the world, is it? It's distracting because it makes us put all our focus on this massive event going on globally. But it's not even the first, virus pandemic. There was a little thing called the Black Death. Several, hundreds of plagues during the Middle Ages. Little thing called World War II. Awful events that have happened in history.
For the record, Jamie's got a degree in history. I didn't go around the table offering our credentials, but yeah, no. you tell us about some of the awful things that have happened in the world.
Well, this is my kind of my party piece at the moment. The word for quarantine comes from the Italian for 40, because it used to be the required number of days that ships during the plague would have to stay out of the harbour before they were deemed safe to mix with society. We don't do 40 days, do we? What is it now? 7 days or something? I don't know. But yeah, there's so much that has happened, is happening, will happen, that will just call into question, well, if God is in control, well, why is the world in such a mess? And to be fair, it's what the authors of the Bible sometimes are asking throughout the book. One of the unified pictures we see in the Bible is real people looking at events very much in real time and struggling to make sense of it, because it is strange, isn't it? When you look, the things that the kind of ancient Israelites went through, times where they didn't, had their lands ripped away from them, put into slavery, and they struggled to make sense of what was going on there. And it is hard when we kind of are so zoomed in to see how on earth is God in control in all of this. Have I stopped?
You have.
Yeah, my internet is quite shaky.
No, sorry, you have stopped answering the question.
Oh, right.
The video is still there.
Fantastic. So they struggled to make sense of it. The Bible it doesn't take those bits out of the Bible. The authors of the Bible didn't say that makes God look bad, so let's get rid of that. It was honest, brutally honest, because it's real people asking real questions. But when you zoom out, you realize that God has got this in control. But the problem is, this is almost a very simplistic answer, and in theory, not easy, but makes logical sense. The reason the world is such a mess is because we live in it. We're not all capable of doing exactly the same evil, but we all contribute to the state that the world is in. Most of the awful events in history are due to men and women choosing to do things that are selfish, only thinking of themselves or their certain people group. It's a really easy solution. How do we get rid of evil and suffering and pain that people go through? Well, just get rid of all of us. That's the easiest way of doing it, isn't it? Because we all contribute. And like the Bible even talks about, because of the way we as a human race have behaved, that even like the earth groans and is reacting and responding to that. We see that in kind of Paul's letters, that even the world we live in is not satisfied with what we've done with it. And you could make what you want of that. You could talk about global warming and the effect we've had on the environment, but there isn't a corner of the planet, or even the that we haven't had an effect as humans on. So the easy solution is get rid of us. But somehow the Bible tells us that God loves us and wants us to be part of his big picture, his story. He wants us to remain, but at the same time, he is in full control of that. So on one sense, it kind of makes logical sense. But once you start thinking about it too much, it becomes a bit too big for the human brain to compute, doesn't it? So it comes back to what I'm saying, isn't it? That trusting that Jesus has got this. It's hard.
Yeah, if you think about like the worst day in history, when you think, right, God, this is out of hand now. People are killing your son on this earth. Good Friday, when Jesus has said that who he is for the 3 years of his ministry, his disciples trust him, he's king, and then the Romans get him and crucify him. And it's as if everything has gone wrong. This is not the plan, surely. He's meant to be the Messiah, he's meant to be the king, he's meant to be the one who frees us and rescues us, and now he's dead in a grave. But those disciples didn't know on Friday that Sunday was coming, and that on Sunday Jesus would rise again, and the whole of history would change. So there's, we have, as you were saying, Jamie, like an idea of, well, this is surely how the plan should go. But God's plan is different, and is gloriously different, but painful. Jesus had to go through death, but he came out the other side so that we can trust when we go through the worst thing ever. If we are in Christ, if we trust in Jesus, we will come through the other side victorious like he did. So we can we know the end of the story. We know this is not going to be it forever. This is not going to be, the pain and suffering we feel now is real, and it hurts and it's horrible. And Jesus is with us through that. And he's come out the other side so that we can come out the other side, and know him and be with him in the new creation when that comes. So I think, our minds think this is how the plan should work, and surely this is what's expected of life for me. But God's plan is different. And the God I know and love, his plans are always better than my small-minded plans. What he's got in store is not always pain-free, but always what's good for us, and that brings glory to him.
I think that's true. And that is the testimony, like Jesus, Jamie was suggesting, in story after story after story in the Bible, is that people in the midst of it don't understand what God's doing. They don't even at the end of it necessarily say, it was A, B, C, D, but they do trust in God and kind of experience the goodness of God, like even through pain and what have you. So you wanted to be subversive, saying, how can you cope in the world? I'm going to be a little bit more also subversive, just to close things off. That for me, whenever I've encountered the question of suffering, which is like a real, it's not an academic question, is it? For us in our household, the pandemic itself has been like an inconvenience. It hasn't been a real weight and a suffering sort of thing. For other people, it may be. So I don't want to play lightly on that. Whenever we speak about suffering, it is like a really personal, emotive thing. But I don't expect to be able to join the dots in what God is doing, or I prefer to say what God is permitting in certain circumstances. But I do hold to a couple of truths. Number one is that God can use ugly things to make beautiful things, or out of ugliness, God is making beauty. That's like the pattern. I think that's kind of one of the things that you were alluding to. But number two, that for me, the great question has always been not why does God allow suffering, but why does God endure suffering? Because it's not just like we're down here on earth suffering and we're pointing the finger to God saying, you said you're in control and you can, well, why don't you sort this out? He's entered into history. Christ has come, the eternal Son has taken on flesh, and being cold in a manger, being hungry as a toddler, like being too hot, has cut his arm, stubbed his toe, has wept at the graveside of a friend, has been beaten, has been falsely accused, has been wrongly convicted, has been crucified and stabbed in the side. God, why don't you do away with suffering? Great question. One of which I don't think even the cleverest person is going to give you a watertight answer for. But surely the better question is, why would God himself endure suffering? Like that is the most mind-blowing to me. even in the equation that he has all the power to deal with suffering, why does he decide to enter in and suffer it? And it's according to the Bible, because that's how he's determined to deal with suffering. Because the picture of the end of the Bible is that perfect world that we all imagine, where there is no pain, there is no death, there is no disease, there is no scorching sun, there is no hunger, there is no sadness. There's the world that God created, and that we can kind of envisage paradise and perfection and all of that. And the Bible story is that God endures suffering on the way to like recreating existence as it was intentionally supposed to be, which doesn't explain like why does God permit pandemic? Why does God permit like more micro individual pain? But it does kind of help us to see there is a much bigger picture going on here. The suffering and pain do not rule God out, but actually the surprising Christian story is that God enters into that suffering in order ultimately to do the very thing that we want to happen right here, right now, and today. I think, Jamie, your point was exactly right. If we seriously wanted that, no more pain and suffering and anguish, the only way that would be achieved would be for humans not to exist anymore. So it's not really a palatable solution to any of us either. Okay, it's 9:15. I promised you guys that I wouldn't keep you up late. Jamie, bless him, his bedtime's normally 8:30. So I want to say thank you to you both for taking the time, taking the energy, taking the effort to come to think and to try and answer. I know you guys don't pretend to have all the answers. I'm the pastor of the church. I certainly don't pretend to have all the answers. Like I say, I think it's good, and it's part of my DNA to be inquisitive and to ask questions and to search for them. And to that end, one of the things that we're doing as a church is running a little course. I can't tell you the time and the date of the course because I want to choose the course that's best fit with someone who wants to come and do the course with us. I think I'm sharing my screen there now. It's called 3-2-1, The Story of God, the World, and You. And it really is 3 sessions coming together, trying to like get an understanding of the world, of God, of ourselves through the lens of Jesus. Trying to understand like how he makes a difference, how he explains all of these things. If you want to be a part of that, then please do jump onto our website, amfordchurch.com/contact, send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to do the course, suggest a time that is suitable for you. Do you know what? If you're just thinking, I don't really want to do a course, but I do want to chat more, by all means, jump on there, send us a message. We can chat via email. We can go grab a cold down and wander around in the nice weather that we're having at the moment. But we don't want to, just because this has got to come to an end, mean that there's no other ways of asking and answering questions. Heck, if you want to just come along to church, then there's loads of ways you can do that. We're broadcasting on Facebook and YouTube every Sunday at 10:30. We're also meeting physically together again in a COVID safe way at 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. All of that sort of info is on our website as well. There we are. Just want to say, guys, thank you very much. And thank you everybody who's come along this evening as well.